Hey guys, my name is Mark, or MCB Gaming here, and welcome back to another video. And today I'm going to be discussing how I think the Precursors could have a role within the story of Halo 6. So ever since I read about the Precursors, this idea has been circulating through my mind on how they could possibly be implemented into Halo 6's story. And before I start the video, it would really mean a lot if you guys would leave a like, if you guys just think the idea of the Precursors coming back in the Halo 6 story would actually be pretty cool. Before we start talking about how it could be implemented into Halo's story, I'm going to give a little analysis on who they are and what they are. Because a casual Halo player would probably not really know who they are, because the Precursors are more an extended universal lore of Halo. So this would just have a better insight so you guys would kind of understand on why they would come back to the story. The Precursors were an alien race that came before the Forerunners, and they were the most powerful force in the universe. These guys are essentially the Guardians of the Galaxy, and they made sure all sentient life in the universe was not harmed from any huge threat. These guys did hold the mantle of responsibility, and they eventually had to make a decision either to give it to the Forerunners or ancient humanity. And humanity at the time was more ancient instead of the humanity we see in a Halo story now. That was more on the technological level of the Forerunners. The Forerunners did eventually outlast against the Precursors because they did make the decision to give their mantle responsibility to humanity and almost completely driving the Precursors into extinction. The last living Precursors either went into hiding and went into stasis, or broke themselves down to a fine dust that would eventually lead to the origin of the Flood virus that ancient humanity would mess around and experiment with, and that eventually infected themselves and other animals on their planets. That would basically make the Flood. The Flood was pretty much like the new Precursors, because it was the Precursors' same biological essence, but it was not really the actual Precursors. And I put new in quotation marks because it's not really the new. Because the Precursors were essentially just very smart Flood, just as smart as the Gravemind probably would. And speaking of the Gravemind, the first Gravemind was actually the Primordial, which was actually a ancient Precursor that did have the same mindset of the Gravemind, and would eventually pass its mindset onto Graveminds in the future. As we saw the Gravemind in Halo 2 and Halo 3, he had pretty much the same collective thoughts of the Primordial. Also guys, one of the few Precursor constructs that we actually know about is the Domain that is present in Halo 5 story, which does have a big key factor in the story. Now with Halo 5 story, the Domain is a major thing that is talked about within the story, and the Cortana and her created forces want to use it as a cure for AI rampancy and as a way to access the mantle responsibility. Also during the events of Halo 5 story, there's an actual Forerunner builder that is one of the last Forerunners to exist that's still alive somehow. He wants to get to the Domain by finding the Forerunner construct called Bastion. Now, the builder is able to access the Domain, and the Domain is actually information gathered by the Precursors over a long period of time that does have all their information, probably some stuff for the mantle responsibility, and also somehow cures AI rampancy. That really, I don't know how it would, but we just know that as a fact. Now obviously the UNSC, Swords of San Helios, and any other forces are going to try to stop the Created from accessing the Domain. So here's when the Precursor involvement can come into the story. Let's say there's a battle that occurs between the Created and the remaining forces against the Created over the Domain. And Cortana does eventually gain access to the Domain, but it's damaged heavily due to immense fighting between Created and non-created forces. This would cause for an alarm to go off that only the remaining Precursors would be informed about, and thus make them come out of stasis, or their dust, if there's any still out there, pretty much recollect and make new Precursors, or just resurrect them basically. So now the Precursors would come as a new faction into the Halo universe, basically just to defend the Domain. The Precursors would only come to defend the Domain only during the time of conflict, and possibly align with humanity and its allied forces because they would realize they are the species that were supposed to be the placeholders of the mantle of responsibility. Once the conflict is over, the Precursors would finally hand down the mantle of responsibility to humanity. Now that the Precursors actually align with humanity does seem a little strange, and will take that feeling of mystery and eeriness to the Halo series. but they could be a background faction that could be seen fighting the created forces. Now, another way the Precursors could be reintroduced back to the Halo universe is through terminals. These terminals should be like Halo 3's terminals and not like Halo 5's audio logs, and even though they're fun to watch, but even not like Halo 2 Anniversary's terminal videos as well. If there would be terminals about the Precursors, I think that they would work best if there were to be a level that actually took place in the domain in Halo 6 or something in collaboration with the domain in Halo 6's story. That would talk about the Precursors and their history and maybe say how they're still out there and all that such. Now, what will this do for Halo? Like I said earlier, bringing the Precursors into Halo 6's story or into the Terminals could bring that mysterious feeling back into the Halo franchise. Before Halo 4, the Forerunners seemed so ancient and mysterious when you would hear about them or go through their buildings. The only Forerunners we would fight in the original trilogy were the Sentinels instead of the Prometheans that were seen all the time in Halo 4 and 5's story. This did take away the feeling of the Forerunners feeling so long gone and brought a feeling of them never being gone. Also, the Flood brought an eerie and mysterious feeling because they were so different compared to the Covenant. You wanted to know about their origins, but at the same time, when you would hear about their origins, it seemed so eerie and just how they were an ever-consuming species. The Precursors couldn't be shown off completely if they would to be bring back into the story, but talked about a while in the domain or in some other remaining Precursor construct. If the Precursors were overshown off like the Prometheans were in Halo 4 and 5, would eventually lose that mysterious feeling very quickly with them, and they wouldn't seem just so mysterious. They'll just seem like another species in the Halo universe. And one of the last things that they could do for Halo is they could bring new weapons into the Halo sandbox that would act so advanced but ancient. Now, I know some people do like the sandbox being limited, but I think this would just be fun to have more weapons in the Halo sandbox. Am I right? Because who loves more weapons? And possibly this would be very cool to maybe bring a Precursor vehicle or two that would be super hyper advanced but yet seem so simple. So there's my opinion on how they could be brought into the mainline series. I personally think they're very interesting, and I want to share my thoughts about this. So, yeah guys, tell me your thoughts if you want the Precursors to come back in the mainline series or not. I'd like to hear what you guys think. And sorry guys if the commentary was like a little like just, I don't want to say bad, but just jittery, just me kind of like stumbling on words. This is the first time I actually wrote a huge script actually, and it took a long time for me to write and a lot of times to record as well, but I hope you guys do enjoy what I had to say. So guys, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the very next one.